Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm Jim Below, your host. Very pleased to have joining me today Paul Krutko, the President, CEO of Ann Arbor Spark. And welcome to Conversations.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And it's been a couple years,
Sure.
but let's review a little bit for our watchers. What is Ann Arbor Spark?
Sure. So about, I'd say 13 years ago, a group of community leaders determined that they wanted to try to maximize some of the economic potential of the community. So at that time, Mary Sue Coleman was president of the university, and her major focus was we have, one of the strongest research universities in the United States, many years leading the United States, but looking at sort of competitors like a Stanford or someplace like that, we weren't seeing that turn into companies, turn into jobs in the region. And there was a concern that there was such an automotive focus that we needed to diversify the economy. So she assembled community leaders. She took the lead in that. She brought local government to the table. She brought private sector leaders to the table. And they formed Spark. And what Spark is essentially a nonprofit. It's a private-public academic partnership. So we get resources from the 3 academic institutions in Washtenaw County, local and county government. And now we have some 70 private sector company partners, and they fund us to engage in an economic development program for Washtenaw County. About 6 years ago, Livingston County, the same kind of leadership up there, looked at us and said, could you do the same kind of work for us if we put together resources to do that? So we function in 2 counties, but our full service package is in Washtenaw County. And what do I mean by that? The principal reason, as I just described, why Spark was formed is to help early stage companies. So about half.
Is it recruiting companies or working with those who say we're going to get started in Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County? Help us.
It's both.
Okay.
And it's both from I have an idea. I'm one person or 2 people, and I want to start up a company. So we work with those kinds of firms. Then we also work with mature companies that have been here for years. And then you're absolutely correct. We represent the region in attracting businesses to come and make investments here, add operations here, add employment here.
How did you get here? Are you a Southeast Michigan, Ann Arbor native, or did you sort of come to help not develop, but expand what Spark is able to do?
Well, hopefully not to create a challenge for anybody. I grew up in the Cleveland area.
Oh, okay.
I'm an Ohioan.
So I did too in Euclid. So.
Yeah, so some people, that becomes a little bit of an issue. But actually, it's interesting as an aside, as a Big Ten community, you often find throughout the community people that went to a variety of Big Ten schools here in Ann Arbor and have different affiliations. But anyway, I grew up there, went to the University of Cincinnati. Actually, I'm trained in more urban design and architecture, but I never practiced. I've started out in sort of the community economic development field. The signature stops along the way was that I worked for Mayor Mike White in Cleveland in the 90s during Cleveland's Renaissance. There is a bit of being recruited in this kind of business, so I was recruited to Jacksonville, Florida, and did downtown and economic development work in Jacksonville, Florida. And then in 2002, at the bottom of the .com recession, I was recruited to Silicon Valley, and I was Chief Development Officer for the city of San Jose. I had the fortune to be able to retire out of that job, a good fortune, and had friends here who were working in Michigan and said, hey, there is this opportunity in Michigan. Could we pass your name along to the people doing the recruiting? And that made sense for us personally because my mother is still alive and lives in Cleveland, so it's only a
much
2
closer
2 hour,
than San Jose, yeah.
Absolutely, and so we made the move. My wife and I about 7 years ago. All of our children are grown, so it wasn't any issue with that.
Now, in coming to Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County, the title President CEO, what does that mean? What do you oversee? First, what do you oversee, and what's your day like?
Well, the Spark has a variety of programs that are a result of funding we receive from a variety of sources and activities that we want to do. So it's a very it's a stimulating job in the context that we do a lot of different things, and I'm sure we'll touch upon them in this conversation. But Spark at this point is about a $6.5 million operation. We have about 25 people. As a president and CEO of that, I report to a board of directors. That board of directors has local municipal government leaders on it. It has private sector CEO types from banking, from law, from companies, from early stage companies. And then we have strong representation from the three academic institutions. So currently Cynthia Wilbanks, who is the Vice President for Intergovernmental Affairs at the University of Michigan, at UM, she's the chair. Dr. Rose Malanka, who is the President of Washington Community College, is the secretary. David Parsegan, who is a partner at Honigman here, is vice chair. And David Rood, who heads DTE's operation. DTE has a significant piece of the company here in Ann Arbor. He is the treasurer. So that gives you a sense. And then daily, we are engaged in a variety of things. Any given day, 2 weeks ago, there was a company from California that is very interested in locating here. So we're helping them and visit sites, think about what those locations might be, helping them meet others in the community that could give them some sense of the experience. We have a number of things we do relative to about half of the operation is really working with very early stage companies on how they protect their intellectual property, how they grow their business. So we do a lot of direct intervention with them.
And in trying to get an understanding, who, in a sense, not owns, you said it's public, private, governmental, is there a designation of members of the board, certain number coming from the education community, a certain number coming from private enterprise, private businesses? In other words,
how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? And in a sense, who's ultimately in charge?
Well, ultimately, as a nonprofit, it's a board. Okay. The board is reflective of what I would describe their financial contribution to the overall effort. And so that's how you kind of make the board. The bylaws that were established when the entity was set up. We're an operating profit. We also have a foundation, and then we have a series of investment funds, because that's another arm of what we do. So when the bylaws were structured, it identifies those different layers that you described and suggests in the bylaws that, for example, not by name, but would say, for example, Howard Lazarus, who is the city manager of Ann Arbor, is on the board. Andy Labar, who's the current county chair, we look to always have the county chair on the board. And then we try to have balance so that there are folks around the table that are CEOs or heads of particular companies. So, for example, Bob Young, who's a significant executive at Toyota here locally, he's on the board. Tim Marshall, Bank of Ann Arbor, is on the board. And
do you look geographic? Because I keep referring to it as, or maybe it is formerly Ann Arbor Spark, but as you say, it's Washington County and Livingston County.
Yeah.
So representation throughout becomes important.
Yeah, we have 2 members of the board that are from Livingston County. The relationship with Livingston County is interesting because they contract with us through their own economic development corporation up there that has public and private members. So we've identified one private sector person and one public sector person that serves on the board.
And you mentioned then within the county, you're speaking or representing the whole county. So as a company might come to you and say, we're looking at moving into Southeast Michigan and we want to look, would it depend on, you say, what kind of business it is or what they're looking for that may direct in different areas within Washtenaw County?
Sure. The one thing I would start with is we, our charge, our mission from the board, from establishing it is, we work with companies that are GDP producing companies. So what does that mean? That means they're selling goods and services not only to our region, but outside our region. So our remit, and others do this, Washington County has a small staff that does this, does the community development kind of thing. So like if you're a company that's going to just sell to you, okay, and is not concerned about an outside market. So one that that everybody kind of understands when you describe it is Zingerman's. Zingerman's has an operation that we all benefit from locally, but they also have their mail order operation that they sell outside the community. So we focus on those kinds of businesses at the beginning of that. And then you asked, the question you were asking is, well, somebody comes to us, what the word we use and is embraced by all the local governments that we in touch is that Spark is agnostic about location. We don't give preference, say, well, you should go here. What we do is we present the best possible buildings, sites to that company, and then
based on their needs and what
based on their needs, and then they make a decision, and we work with that community to help that happen. Now, one of the things that's very important in this is to be able that we talk to individual municipalities and say, you know, how you position yourself is very important. How friendly, if we want to use that term, are you to the business as they're considering your community? Do you actually have places where they can go? You know, one of the issues that is really important with our county partners right now, and is also important to us, is that there is a little bit of a tale of two counties here, where west of 23 has done very, very well economically. East of 23, when you think about Ypsilanti and Ypsilanti Township, has not. And so we've got a major emphasis in trying to encourage companies to think about East County as a location for their business.
Well, we're going to take a short break, come back and look at some of the very specific programs that you offer and that businesses and how the community benefits from what you do.
Sure.
Ask our viewers to stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Well, you should do laundry every day. You should do it. I don't want to smell that.
That's way too much. Every day? How much laundry do you think I go through in a single day?
Well, at least wear clean clothes.
You should do laundry every day.
I got plenty of clothes to wear. New outfit
everywhere.
every
Well, I'm sick of smelling you, dude.
You
stink, dude.
I shouldn't
Just
smell
wash your
you
clothes,
at all.
man.
There's so many smells.
Then check and mate.
Hello and welcome back to Conversations. I'm speaking today with Paul Krutko, President CEO of Ann Arbor Spark. And now that we have a better idea of what it is, what programs specifically are you working on that, you know, the economy has improved in the last, say, 5 years.
Right.
What kinds of things do you offer to your, whether it be members or going out front with the community?
Sure. So one of the things that we didn't touch on in the earlier segment is that essentially we do this work for all the municipal governments here in Washtenaw County and in Livingston County. So for example, Saline does not have do this kind of economic development work. They look to us to do that. So the team that works on that in terms of the organization is there to work with either an existing business who might say to us, we want to expand. How do we go about doing that? And what we do is the state of Michigan does have a plate, if you will, of incentive tools. And the way the governor and his team have organized the state is they look to organizations like Ann Arbor Spark to in a sense, package that proposal to the state. So we've done that a number of times. You know, what I would share with you is we only count the things that we really work on. So last year we did 69 of those kinds of projects. Resulted in about $120 million of investment. So this is companies doing investment.
Right.
And
it's money that they've committed to, whether it's expansion or
right.
whatever, within the
right.
Washtenaw, Livingston County
exactly.
district.
I'm going to, you know, one that viewers might know, it may be more of a southern Washtenaw County reference, but there was an old bearing factory, NSA factory on State. Got vacant, they closed, and we worked to bring this new company, Truck Hero, in there that is doing sort of this accessory market for trucks. So we worked both with Pittsfield Township to help them get that company in there. We helped Pittsfield Township in thinking about how they might help it from a tax perspective, and then getting some state work for that. So last year, that was the companies that we worked with currently had an employment of almost 2,100 jobs. And the investments are going to result in about 800 new jobs. Since, I only count since I've been here, so since 2012, we've done about 270 projects, and it's almost $1 billion worth of investment in the community. So that's a pretty significant impact on that side. The other part of the house, and I apologize because I'm just going to look at some notes, is on this early stage companies.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that would be very interesting to your audience. So what is that about? Well, that's where we're working with a 1 to 2 person company that might have a new technology that says, you know, we want to grow ourselves. Yes. So what do we do with them? Well, we run things like, we've had now almost 30 of these. We do them twice a year. Something called a boot camp. And what is that? You come in and say, I've got this great idea. I have this product or this service. And we take you through an exercise to make sure it really is a good product or service, help you think about conceiving that, do customer discovery, and position you in a way that you can attract potentially venture investment, early stage capital to get your project off the ground. So last year we had, and we have a facility downtown. It's our accelerator, 3-story facility, right on the Liberty Park is where it is. Last year we had 100 different companies in that building as tenants.
Come through at some.
That's right. And we worked with them, and they were able to capture investments and position themselves for their next stage of growth. And that was really one of the principal reasons Spark was formed, because the university can license an idea to you, but the university can't house you to be able to become a company. So that's something that we you know, are very pleased about, that we've been able to do very successfully, and we're highly regarded in that area.
Going back to what you talked about earlier then, those companies, those people who come in with these ideas, you mentioned that you're really working with those that it's not just Ann Arbor or just Washtenaw County. So it's, you know, it's getting, learning whether or not their idea will work beyond their living room where they have this idea.
Exactly. So there's a young woman, an interesting story to share, a young woman entrepreneur with a company called My Petrino. Now that may not, Me Petrino, that might not mean anything to you, but what it is she identified a market that's a Hispanic market, that there is this tradition of quinceañeras. So what is that? You're a young woman, and you're sort of, it's your coming out, and you reach out in a historical way. You've reached out to your relatives and friends to sponsor you. She found out how hard that was to organize, and she created an app to do that. And it's gotten tremendous pull in the Hispanic community. Now, we don't have a large Hispanic community here, right? But she is able to now tap and do this across the United States and have great success as a business. What did we do?
But get it started locally,
right,
and have it be operational from here, and then branch out.
Exactly. And so that's the kind of thing we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is scale local company ideas to have a national or a global presence.
In your time here, almost 7 years now, or into your 7th year, what changes have you seen as far as either the type of businesses that are looking at Washtenaw County, how often Washtenaw County now gets sort of considered?
Excellent question. The one thing that is very interesting, if you just look at the overall numbers, and we do rely on the folks at UM. They do a really good job of monitoring our local economy, that team. One of the things that they pointed out is before the recession, the Great Recession in 2008, on the kinds of jobs we work on, the GDP producing jobs, 65% of those were manufacturing and 35% were professional technical. So we went through the downturn, but as a region, because of the diversity we were creating, we were always better on unemployment. We were always better in terms of GDP than the state and the nation. But coming out of the recession and recovering all the jobs we lost, we've passed that number and we've got more than we had. However, the structure changed. We're now 65% professional technical and 35% manufacturing. So not
when
only
you say those numbers, is that within Washtenaw County, within the state?
Yes, that's a Washtenaw County number. So what does that mean? In our local economy, we not only had the ability to weather better the recession, and I'm not talking about the university and the educational jobs, I'm talking about private sector jobs. We were able to weather that, but we also were able to manage a structural change in the types of jobs that were in our economy. So that's one point. The second point is you asked how we're looked at. The high quality of life and the efforts that community leaders on a variety of fronts, whether it's trail development, whether it's recreation, quality of life things, puts us in a very competitive position. People, you can
like Ann Arbor in Washtenaw County.
You can find a site for your business or a talented group of people anywhere potentially in the country. But what's changed in my work since I've been doing it is that, and you probably relate to this, when I graduated college, that generation was, where's the job? And I'm going to move to the job. Right. Now, the talented people decide where they want to live to first, and the companies are following them. Okay. So what's important about Ann Arbor? Our openness, our diversity, the fact that we do, as an international community, have a variety of nationalities here. In the last few years, more than 3/4 of the projects we did were foreign companies deciding to locate here. German, Thai, French, Chinese, Japanese. Right. And that's due to the fact that, as compared to some places else in the country that aren't open to people from around the world, or different kinds of qualities in terms of their thinking or lifestyles, it's very important.
What are the challenges, let's call them? In other words, what in Washtenaw County could the county, the public-private sector work on to make it even more appealing?
Well, I think that, you and I talked a little bit before we began, that how we think about transportation and how we move people around the community is going to be very, very important. I think some of the things that the transit entity here has done recently to try to help people get from Ypsilanti to Ann Arbor is very, very important. Where we have a problem and a challenge we're trying to deal with is lots and lots of technology companies want to be in downtown Ann Arbor. We've got a less than 2% vacancy rate. Wow. So how do we create some of the other places in the community? Let's say
tech campuses outside of
downtown.
Sure,
I use the phrase archipelago. Okay. How do we make some technology companies think that downtown Dexter is a good location? Or really what we put a lot of emphasis on and had some success is getting some companies to move to downtown Ypsilanti. That's a real opportunity.
Is it fair to say that if you're successful with one or two, that it's almost a domino effect of others then feeling, you say, comfortable or looking at those other regions of the county?
What people tell me, I learn a lot of the stories of the community. This is sort of what I do as my career, is that people forget that Liberty and Washington were very vacant 10 years ago. And with the certain initial investments to be attractive to technology companies, people have located there. I think one of the things that's going to be a dramatic change for the eastern side of the county is the whole American Center for Mobility project. Yes. You asked me sort of the things Spark does. One of the things is we do strategic work. We identified the idea, we identified the site, and then we spent a good 3 or 4 years convincing others, including the governor, that the American Center for Mobility is something that we really needed to do. Now with it being open, we're seeing companies wanting to come there. So I think
And
that's
the eastern side of the county is, as far as proximity, closer.
yes.
So it makes it more appealing to potentially look to that area of the county to locate if distance is an issue.
And it's also, if you think about it, where the University of Michigan is doing its automotive mobility research is sort of on the north campus. You're in between there and American Center for Mobility, to the 23 sort of corridor on that side of town, makes that a very attractive location.
In the last minute or so, what is in the future for 2018 that Spark is working on that you can share?
Sure. Well,
some of it you can't really say.
Yeah, I'm not going to go focus on a company thing. I'm going to focus on a different part of it. What we've discovered in our work recently is that companies now are not as concerned or worried about financial incentives.
Okay.
What they're worried about is the ability to get the workforce. We're in a sort of a war across the nation for talented people. So one of the things we're really focusing on, and I would have your audience pay attention to, is we started this thing called Tech Trek 2 years ago, which was the companies opening their doors, and we did it on the last day of school so young people could see that. This year that's going to expand into 3 days of activity. Check out the Observer. There will be an ad in it in the next edition that has June 13th to June 15th that has 3 days of activity in and around downtown that's all focused on what's happening in technology. We're going to close Washington, between Division and 5th. There's going to be a mobility row. 20 mobility companies are going to be there with their new products for you to see, in addition to getting in and seeing those 70 companies that are partnering with us on it. The morning of the last day, the 15th, we had a very successful event last year in the Michigan Theater called Tech Talk, which we had 13. We're going to have 13 companies this year doing short presentations on what their cool ideas are. So why is that important? Because what we know is we need to show that this is a great place where you can not only live, but there's great jobs here, so that we retain more of the students and we attract more people to come here for the jobs.
I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to have you back here.
Happy to do it.
I want to thank our viewers for joining us today and look forward to your continued support here on Conversations. Thank you.